I want to start today with a scenario that I think is going to feel uncomfortably familiar to you. You are sitting at your desk. You have a decision to make.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's a big one like quitting a job or starting a business, or maybe it's just kicking off a new project. You have all the data. You have your pros and cons list. You've asked three different friends what they think, and yet you are completely frozen.
The classic paralysis of analysis.
Exactly. I'm your host, by the way, and I know I've been there. You tell yourself you're just being prudent, or, you're waiting for the right moment. But if we're being completely honest, it's really just fear dressed up as logic.
Right. And I'm your resident expert for today's deep dive.
Ah.
And it's true, it's a completely universal experience.
Mm.
But what's really interesting is that while we often treat this indecision as a minor personality quirk,
Mm.
like having a sweet tooth or being bad at math,
Yeah.
the source material we're covering today treats it like a disease.
A very fatal one, at least when it comes to success. So we are going back to the absolute titan of the genre today. We are doing a deep dive into Napoleon Hill's 1938 classic, Think and Grow Rich. But we aren't trying to boil the whole ocean today. We are laser focusing on just Chapter 8.
The chapter that is simply titled Decision.
Now, before you roll your eyes and say, oh, great, some old book from the Great Depression, we really need to set the stage here, because this isn't just some guy's random opinion, right?
Right, that is a crucial distinction to make. Hill didn't write a novel. He actually described this book, in his own words, as a textbook on individual achievement.
A textbook.
Yeah. It was the result of 25 years of research and analysis. He interviewed over 500 of the most successful, wealthy men of his era, people like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison. He was basically looking for a concrete success formula.
He was reverse engineering the titans of industry. But here's the part that really struck me when I was prepping for this deep dive. He didn't just study the winners.
No, and that is arguably the much more important data set here. He analyzed over 25,000 men and women who had experienced failure. He wanted to know exactly why they crashed and burned.
25,000 case studies of failure. I mean, that is a staggering amount of data to crunch, especially back then.
It is. But the pattern he found was undeniable. When Hill compiled his list of the 30 major causes of failure, do you know where lack of decision landed?
It was near the top.
Near the very top. Hill states it unequivocally. Procrastination, which he defines as the direct opposite of decision, is a common enemy that practically everyone must conquer.
If you don't kill it, it kills your chances.
That's the core concept. It's the 7-step toward riches, according to the book, Mastering Procrastination.
Okay, so we all know indecision is bad. That's fairly intuitive. But this is where the chapter gets a little spicy. And frankly, this is where I need you to help me parse this, because Hill makes a claim about decision-making that sounds, well, it sounds a bit dangerous.
I think I know exactly which part you're referring to.
The pattern of the wealthy. So Hill says that when he looked at those 500 millionaires, every single one of them shared a specific trait. They reached decisions promptly, and they changed them very slowly if they changed them at all.
Yes. Promptly reached, slowly changed.
Hold on. Deciding promptly. That sounds a lot like just being impulsive. If I am investing my life savings or choosing a career path, shouldn't I take my time? Isn't sleeping on it usually good advice? It sounds almost like Hill is telling us to just leap without looking.
I'm really glad you pushed back on that, because it is definitely the most common misunderstanding of this entire chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Hill isn't advocating for recklessness. He isn't saying you should gamble. He's talking about a concept he calls definiteness of purpose.
Unpack that definiteness for us.
Think about it this way. Why does it take most people 6 months to decide whether to buy a house or take a new job? Is it really because they're actively processing new data for 6 solid months?
No. Usually you have all the data in the first week. The rest of the time is it's just worrying.
Exactly. They're oscillating. They are so terrified of making the wrong choice that they end up making no choice at all. The successful figures Hill studied people like Henry Ford. They knew exactly what they wanted.
Because they had that definite purpose.
Right. So when an opportunity came along that aligned with that purpose, they could say yes instantly. It wasn't an impulsive yes, it was a highly prepared yes.
Okay, so the speed comes from the clarity. If I know definitively that I want to drive to New York, I don't need to sit there and debate whether to turn onto the highway.
Precisely. And look at the flip side, the failure group. Hill found that unsuccessful people reached decisions, if they reached them at all, very slowly. and they change them frequently and quickly.
Like a weather vane.
Exactly like a weather vane. They finally make a choice after agonizing over it for months. Then they meet a friend for coffee.
Yeah.
The friend makes one skeptical comment, and boom, they change their mind. They pivot immediately.
Hill actually has this great line where he calls indecision and procrastination twin brothers. He says where you find one, you usually find the other.
And he says, you have to kill this pair of twin brothers before they hog-tie you to the treadmill of failure.
It's a very visceral image. I like it. But let's go deeper into the why. Why are we like this? Is it just human nature to be wishy-washy? Because reading the source, Hill seems to think this is largely a learned behavior.
He absolutely does. And he points the finger at a culprit that I think might surprise some people. He blames the education system.
Yeah, he really comes for the schools in this chapter.
He does. And remember, he's writing this in 1938, but his critique feels incredibly modern. He argues that the major weakness of the school system is that it doesn't teach the habit of decision. Indecision actually begins in youth and becomes permanent through school and college.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it. School is practically the opposite of decision. You are told what books to read, when to show up, when you can leave, what the test answers are. You spend your first 18 years strictly following instructions.
Right. You are training the muscle of compliance, not the muscle of decision. So students graduate with a diploma, but they don't have a definite purpose. They have a lot of general knowledge, but absolutely no specific direction. And Hill throws out a statistic here that honestly made my jaw drop.
Are you talking about the 98% stat?
Yes. Hill says that 98 out of every 100 people working for wages are in their specific positions simply because they lacked the definiteness of decision to plan a specific position.
98%. So he's saying only 2 people out of 100 actually deliberately chose their career path.
According to his research, yes. The other 98 just took the first place they found.
That is genuinely terrifying. It's this idea of drifting. You need a job, you see a help wanted sign or a LinkedIn post, you apply, you get it, and suddenly 10 years have passed and you are still sitting there, not because you passionately wanted to be there, but because you never made a definite decision not to be.
That is exactly the tragedy Hill is trying to wake the reader up to. He says the world makes room for the person whose words and actions show they know where they're going. But if you don't deliberately pick a destination, the world is just going to pick one for you and you probably won't like it.
Right. And to drive this home, he illustrates this with 2 really powerful stories. One is in business and one is political. But they both hinge on this idea of a high-stakes decision. Let's start with the business one, the story of the Great Chicago Fire.
This is a masterclass in the difference between logic and vision. So it's the late 1800s. The Great Fire happens. Chicago is effectively gone, burned to the ground. A group of merchants are standing on State Street, just looking at the smoking rubble of their stores.
Total ruin. I can't even imagine what that must have looked and smelled like.
It's completely hopeless.
Yeah.
So they hold a meeting right there to decide what to do. And the logical, prudent, smart decision is obvious to everyone. Pack up, leave Chicago, go to a city that isn't a pile of ash, and start over.
Cut your losses. It makes perfect logical sense.
And that is exactly what almost all have decided to do, except for one man, Marshall Field.
The department store legend.
Yes. Field points a finger at the smoking remains of his store and says, "Gentlemen, on that very spot, I will build the world's greatest store, no matter how many times it may burn down."
No matter how many times it will burn down, that isn't a business strategy. That's something else entirely.
It's a burning desire. Hill uses that story to show that a true, definite decision often ignores the current reality. The physical reality was ash, but Field decided on a future reality, the world's greatest store, and he refused to budge from it. The other merchants were merely reacting to their circumstances. Fields was creating his.
That's a really key distinction, reacting versus creating. But then Hill pivots. He takes this concept of sticking to your guns and he raises the stakes from mere bankruptcy to literal execution. He talks about the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, this is where the chapter gets profound. We tend to think of the Declaration today as just a piece of paper in a museum behind bulletproof glass. We view it as a historical inevitability. But Hill reminds us that at the exact moment it was signed, it was essentially a death warrant.
Right. These weren't just politicians voting on a minor tax bill. They were subjects of the British Crown.
Exactly. Hill described the tense atmosphere in that room. For days they debated. There was intense fear. There was uncertainty. But when those 56 men signed that document, they knew that if the colonies lost the war, every single one of them would be hanged for treason.
Talk about having skin in the game.
It was the ultimate definite decision. Hill points out it required great courage. It wasn't just a wish for freedom. It wasn't a hope that things would peacefully get better. It was a definite decision that cut off all other options.
And that ties perfectly into the listener's life. Obviously, you probably aren't going to face the gallows for your career choices. But Hill argues that when you reach a definite decision to procure a specific job or accumulate wealth, you are staking your economic freedom on it.
Right. And that leads perfectly into the metaphor Hill uses next, which I actually think is the most actionable image in the whole chapter, the concept of burning the ships.
Oh, yes, the burning ships. Break that down for us.
So it's a story from antiquity. A great warrior sails his army to an enemy's country. They are vastly outnumbered. The soldiers are terrified. They land on the beach, unload all their equipment, and then the commander gives an order that sounds completely insane. He says, burn the ships.
He intentionally traps his own army.
He addresses his men as their only ride home is going up in flames behind them. And he basically says, we win or we perish. There is no going back. And because retreat was now physically impossible, they fought with a ferocity that made them unbeatable. And they won.
We win or we perish. Hill is arguing that the main reason we procrastinate, the reason we drift through life, is simply because we have too many safety nets. We have a plan B and a plan C.
Exactly. If you're starting a business, but you tell yourself, well, if it doesn't work out in 6 months, I can always just go back to my old corporate job. You have not burned the ships. Your subconscious mind knows there is a comfortable way out. A real decision cuts off the retreat.
That is genuinely tough to hear. We really love our safety nets. But there is another enemy of decision that Hill mentions, one that I think is even more pervasive today with social media than it was in 1938. Opinions.
Oh, absolutely. Hill does not mince words here. He explicitly warns against being influenced by the opinions of others, your friends, your relatives, your neighbors.
He literally calls opinions the cheapest commodities on earth.
It's so true. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to be wished upon anyone who will accept them.
But why is this so dangerous? I mean, shouldn't we listen to advice from people we trust?
There is a massive difference between seeking expert counsel and just absorbing opinions. Hill says that close friends and relatives, often with the very best of intentions, can absolutely handicap you with their opinions because they project their fears, their limitations, and their past failures onto you.
So you excitedly tell your brother-in-law about your big idea, and he laughs or points out 5 reasons why it won't work, and suddenly your balloon pops. You start doubting yourself.
And Hill's rule on this is incredibly strict. He says if you're influenced by opinions when you reach decisions, you will not succeed in any undertaking. You will end up living someone else's life.
So you have to keep your own counsel.
He has a great line for this. He says, tell the world what you intend to do, but first show it. Meaning your actions count far more than your words. Don't talk about it, decide, act, and let the results speak.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, procrastination and drifting. We've seen the high stakes involved, freedom versus slavery, success versus failure. We know we need to burn the ships and ignore cheap opinions. Now, I want to get really practical. How do we execute?
Let's do it. Let's look at the action plan.
Yeah, Hill outlines a very specific process. He calls it the 6 steps to turning a desire into reality. And I want to walk through these briefly because they sound simple on the surface, but I have a feeling they are quite deceptive.
They are deceptive. Most people read these 6 steps, they nod their heads, but almost no one actually takes the time to do them.
Step 1, fix in your mind the exact amount of money or whatever your specific goal is that you desire.
The emphasis there is on the word exact. You can't just say, I want to be rich, or I want a better job. That is way too vague.
Right.
The subconscious mind needs a distinct target. It has to be, I want $100,000, or I want the position of director of sales.
Right. Step 2, determine exactly what you intend to give in return.
This is the reality check of the whole process. Hill is very clear that there is no such reality as something for nothing. If you want the money or the success, what is the service, the time, or the value that you're exchanging for it?
Step 3, establish a definite date.
This creates urgency. Without a firm date, a decision is really just a wish.
Step 4, create a definite plan and start immediately, whether you are ready or not.
I love that clause, whether you were ready or not. That is his ultimate anti-procrastination mechanism. Most of us wait until the plan is totally perfect before we take step 1. Hill says start immediately and fix the plan as you go.
Step 5, write it all out. A clear, concise statement of the amount, the time limit, what you'll give, and the plan.
This step takes it from a nebulous thought floating in your head and turns it into a physical object in the real world. It anchors it.
And finally, step 6. This is the one that I think modern readers definitely struggle with the most. This is the one that feels a little out there. Read the statement aloud, twice daily, once before bed and once in the morning. And as you read it, you have to see and feel yourself already in possession of the goal.
Yeah, play devil's advocate here. It does sound strange.
I mean, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, my bank account is overdrawn, and I'm reading a piece of paper that says, I'm a millionaire. Isn't that just lying to myself? How does that actually do anything?
It's a completely fair question. To a purely logical mind, it sounds delusional. But Hill calls this process autosuggestion. You have to think of it less like magic and much more like programming software.
Programming the brain.
Exactly. Your subconscious mind is essentially a data processing machine. It doesn't judge whether a thought is objectively true or false. It just accepts whatever you feed it, especially if it's backed by emotion.
Yeah.
If you constantly feed it fear like, I'm never going to make it, it processes that as a directive and it sabotages you.
So by reading this written statement out loud with emotion, with faith, as Hill calls it, you are deliberately overriding that old programming.
You are convincing your subconscious that this success is inevitable. It requires absolute faith. Once your subconscious truly believes it, it starts to pick up on opportunities that your conscious mind would have completely missed. It gives you the hunch to make a certain phone call or to turn right instead of left.
It's like the Henry Ford example we talked about earlier.
Right. Ford was uneducated, he had no capital to start with, and he faced incredible opposition. Logically speaking, he didn't have a chance. But he had a state of mind that absolutely demanded success. He didn't wait around for the perfect opportunity. He created it because he fundamentally believed the success was already his.
And this brings us nicely to the secret that Hill teases throughout the entire book. We've been dancing around it this whole time.
Yes. The secret is money consciousness.
Which means what exactly? In actionable language.
It is the mental state where you are so definitively convinced of your success that you literally see yourself in possession of the goal before the actual transfer of cash or title happens. Poverty is the default state of humanity. It requires no plan, no effort. Riches have to be actively attracted. You have to magnetize your mind with decision.
So to summarize what we've unpacked today from Chapter 8, failure is almost always intimately tied to indecision.
Yes, lack of decision is the primary cause.
Success comes from knowing exactly what you want, deciding promptly to go get it, and refusing to change your mind when things get difficult.
And physically burning the ship so you can't retreat even if you want to.
We need to stop listening to the cheap opinions of everyone around us, and we need to actually do the hard work of the 6 steps, defining the exact goal, writing it down, and programming our minds every single day, whether we feel ready or not.
I know it sounds like a lot of effort. It is. But compare that daily effort to the massive cost of spending 40 years drifting in a job you hate just because you never made a definite decision to leave.
Touché. That is the real cost of procrastination. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final thought from this chapter that builds on everything we've discussed. It's a bit of poetry Hill includes, but it hits incredibly hard.
Are you talking about the poem about bargaining with life?
That's the one. The line goes, I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more.
And then later in the poem, when the narrator finally asks for a fortune, life happily pays that too.
The lesson there is brutal, but also incredibly empowering. Hill is saying that life is just an employer. It pays you exactly what you firmly ask of it. If you ask for a penny, if you accept mediocrity, if you decide to just get by, that is all you are ever going to get. Financial independence and desirable positions are not within reach of the person who neglects to expect, plan, and demand them.
You have to demand it, and the specific mechanism you use to demand it is decision.
So, are you asking life for a penny, or are you demanding what you're actually worth? That is the question we are leaving you to mull over today.
Stop overanalyzing.
Yeah.
Burn your ships. Make the decision.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.